we engaged with the media. The long faces of the United Nations officials were something to behold. They said, if you have the media, they'll distort what you say, they'll be jumping on particular issues, and it's better just to, we've got to keep them very strictly under control. But my view, and that of my colleagues, was let 1,000 flowers bloom, because it's important to have the media there. The media become part of the educative process of the Commission of Inquiry. And as in our own countries, if you have an inquiry with media, the community, the general community, in our case, the international community, becomes interested and becomes expecting of an outcome. You raise the expectation that something will happen as a result of the inquiry. And so the media took a very close part and brought our message around the world of what we were unfolding in our investigation. And I think the media and the transparency generally that we followed was a very important lesson. The seventh lesson was the importance of follow-up. When we produced our report, we then embarked upon an effort to bring the report and our conclusions to an international audience through press conferences in Geneva and in New York, but also to bring it to the notice of the United Nations. And we did the rounds. We brought it to the attention of the Human Rights Council, and we got a very big vote in the Human Rights Council in favour of following up the report of the Commission of Inquiry. 30 of the 45 member states agreed, and only 6 opposed the recommendations that were expressed to follow up our report. In the General Assembly, 116 countries supported the proposal and only 20 opposed the proposal. And then it was sent to the Security Council, which itself, I think, grew out of the increasing demand of the international community that something should be done. So it went up to the Security Council, and there, on the 22nd of December, a vote was taken in the Security Council on a procedural resolution to put the matter of North Korea on the agenda of the Security Council. The only other country on which human rights has been put on the agenda of the Security Council is Myanmar, Burma. And it's a very exceptional thing, and it's now on their agenda, and for the next 3 years it will be on the agenda, and you don't need any special procedural step to raise the issue because it's an agenda item. It can be raised by any member of the Council during that time. The 8th lesson I learned were the frustrations of working for the United Nations. I had a few earlier when I was Special Representative for Cambodia, and I didn't know that I would be going back into that somewhat frustrating world, but there it was. I was back there. I found, for example, that there is a regulation governing air transport about when you want to change your ticket. You have to give 19 days notice of the change of the ticket. But given that sometimes the reason that you're wanting to change your ticket is because something rather urgent has come up and you need to change the ticket quickly. And nowadays, we don't even have paper tickets where they've got to write it out, as I'm old enough to remember. It's a flick of the computer, but 19 days notice was the rule, and that's just one of the rules of demand. These things drive you to distraction when they arise, but it's just part of the learning process. And the 9th lesson was the interrelationship between international peace and security and human rights, demonstrated by what the Security Council has accepted as part of its agenda. This won't surprise lawyers, because when you look at the Charter of the United Nations, up there in the original statement, the first paragraphs of the objectives of the United Nations are international peace and security, universal human rights, justice. They are the fundamental principles on which the UN system has been built. but the two states that voted against the procedural motion, the Russian Federation and China, take the view that you should keep the two entirely separate because universal human rights, they say, is inherently very political, as if international peace and security were not political. But the interrelationship of universal human rights and peace and security is demonstrated by now the agenda item concerning North Korea on the program of the Security Council. If they had gone ahead with our substantive recommendation to refer the case of North Korea to the International Criminal Court, as can be done exceptionally under the Rome Statute, that would be a substantive resolution of the Security Council, and in respect of that, the concurrence in the vote of the 5 permanent members is required under the Charter, and that concurrence would not have been there, at least on the 22nd of December when the vote was taken. And the 10th lesson I learned once again was how the waves of international law are coming. I'm old enough to remember being taught international law by a very great teacher of international law, Julius Stone. And he taught me international law in the 1950s, and that was just after the Korean War. The Korean War was 1950 to 53, and at the beginning of the Korean War, there was the question of the vote of the Security Council to establish the United Nations force for Korea, which became possible because the Soviet Union was missing from its seat. Mr. Vyshinsky was outside the chamber because he was objecting to the credentials of China, which were still being maintained by the nationalist government of China, and so he was missing. And so it slipped through. One of the big debates of international law at that time was that a valid vote, because it said in the Charter that it has to have the concurring vote, and did they disable themselves by their absence from participating so that they could not complain about the lack of a concurring vote? It's still a question on which lawyers can debate. But here, in this age, wind the clock forward 50 years, and I'm still dealing with the issues of Korea, which I was being taught about by Julius Stone back in the 1950s, but through the prism of universal human rights. And in my work as a municipal judge, to the scandal of some of my colleagues on the High Court of Australia, I did what Justice Breyer and Justice Ginsburg and other judges have done, Justice Souter in this country, of having regard to the developments of international law. It's the milieu in which our domestic system is operating. It's a natural development, and it's an increasing development. We had a case in Australia recently about prisoners voting. Now, you are really barbarous in the United States in the way you deal with prisoners, and the way many people are in your jails for 3 offences, many of which could be rather trivial offences, and why you haven't found a constitutional foundation for dealing with this is a real puzzle to me. But in Australia, following a decision in Canada the case was Sauvé against the Queen, and then there was a decision of the European Court of Human Rights, which said prisoners lose their rights to liberty, but they don't lose their rights as citizens, and they are entitled to vote although they are in prison. And in Australia, that's what the High Court of Australia, with myself participating, held, with the help of the decision of the Supreme Court of Canada and of the European Court of Human Rights. The problems are now so common that to turn your back against the very clever people who are dealing with the conceptual issues of similar problems is a mistake. And